Good afternoon, excuse me, and welcome to the Epsom International Boarding School webinars. I'm Mark Langston, I'll be the moderator for you today. Now, this is the third webinar in our series, and the topic today, educators around the world are calling for exam-based learning to be axed. What impact could this have for your children's education? In truth, this is a topic that it's really been around for decades. And the main reasons they've really sort of cropped up again is as a result of COVID and the simple fact that last year, 2020, the main exams that everyone's talking about, which are IGCSE and A-levels, were actually cancelled. So today, the whole process is we're going to be hearing from Epsom International Boarding School, our teaching faculty. Will be actually a Q&A with a panel of speakers. And at the end of that, for another 10, 15 minutes, we'll have a full Q&A session with our parents and people watching today on the webinar. So let me introduce you to our panel of speakers from Epsom today. First of all, we have Mrs. Alice Stokes, head of prep school. Alice got a master's degree in education from the University of Bath. Loads of experiences included prep schools in London as well as Germany and the Netherlands, and before actually doing the full international leg and coming over to Asia. Mr. Pedro, head of business studies and economics, head of modern foreign languages, and head of EPQ, which stands for Extended Project Qualification. We'll hear a little bit more about what that means from Phil later on. But Phil has had a variety of experiences, double degrees, Austria, Japan, and the UK before coming to Epsom in 2018. And lastly, Mrs. Kate Carden-Brown, our Director of Missions and Head of Higher Education. Kate's experience stems over sort of 25 years of education. She's actually been a head of sixth form in the UK as well before finally taking the plunge and coming over to Asia in 2018. So let's start off. First of all, question to Phil Pedro. There really is a lot of discussion out there about this exam-based learning. We know that it's fundamentally about COVID-19. Questions are coming up. Students weren't able to actually take their final exams, but it's not something new. This has really been around for a while. So your take, Phil, in terms of what you're seeing and your experience, why exams important and what are the advantages of actually exam-based learning?
Thank you, Mark. That's a very good question. So exams are the traditional method we use to assess students. On the other side, what you have is teacher assessments. And recently, they have emerged in the news as an alternative to traditional exams. So really, for teachers and educators around the world, this is not a new discussion. Recent discussions on exams began with the pandemic, with COVID-19, and schools having to close down, so students having to do lessons online, and online learning has really taken over worldwide. So last year in the UK and around the world, exams were cancelled, students had to study online. This year we have very much the same scenario. So I believe exams are a fair way to assess students. It gives them a chance, regardless of their background, to show what they've learned over a period of 1 or 2 years for their GCSEs or A-levels. And they can demonstrate really their knowledge, their learning during that paper they sit. And don't forget as well, for universities, grades are essential. Applicants have to provide universities with their grades, GCSE, A-level, and applicants are ranked according to the grades they achieved in exams. So it's important, I believe, for parents to understand that. For GCSE and A-levels, the way we assess students is gradual. So at GCSE, you have a range of subjects, many subjects that the students get to learn about, and later on at A-level, they specialize. So this is as well a good thing about the exams. They learn many things at the beginning, and later on, they specialize. So for parents, what I think is important really is to make sure they select a school that is successful in that area, a school that has tradition preparing students for examination. And at Epsom, what we offer at GCSE is a range of different subjects that the students can select from. And later on, yes, they specialize. Yes, they get to know more about science, geography, maths, whatever subject they decide to go for. We prepare them very early on. So exams may take place in year 11 and year 13, but way before we prepare them to make sure that they have this mindset, that they are prepared to sit exams, that they are prepared to learn and also to use what they've learned in an exam setting. And this is going to be very important later on in their life when they study at university or when they have to do a job interview and so on. Prepare for exams, prepare for specific events in their lives. And at Epsom, we have teachers who are specialists and we have small classes. So thanks to this, students and teachers can build a relationship where teachers know exactly what the students need and they can support them accordingly. That is to do with EL support, so English, maths, or geography, whatever subject, you'll have support for students in the classroom, outside the classroom. And I think this is what we want to achieve at Epsom, to make sure that the students are successful in their examination, but also in their life.
Thanks, Phil. So I think what you're saying there is that there needs to be some level of a balance. And to be honest, there have been courses out there, international baccalaureate, for example. That is a different kind of educating experience where there's more coursework, less exam-based. But I think what you're trying to say here is the concept of exam-based learning is always going to be present. And it's about fairness. So in other words, let's say, for example, a child from a background where they really can't afford great education. Based on merit, a child would be able to actually achieve scholarships that would allow them to actually enter the kind of schools and the pathways onto university that really could set them apart for life. So education as such, in relation to examinations, is something which is a positive, and it's, please excuse me, and it's something that adult life is, it's prevalent in adult life. It's probably not going to away. It may morph a little bit as we progress over the next several years, but testing, examinations, comprehension, learning, it's an important part of what schools do. Okay, question for Alice. I mean, Alice, we've heard a little bit from Phil, and that's very much the senior school aspect of it. But I'd be interested to know that, given the fact that education really is the early years to year 1 to year 6, how important are examinations, and what actually happens for children in your prep school?
Thanks, Mark. Well, it's worth noting that before any exams can be held, a student must learn to hold a pencil, to read and write and understand numbers, and this is where we come in. Maths and English are tested every term, and the results inform the teacher's planning for the next step. We can reflect upon the test results to identify areas that need further attention. Like Phil said, our small class sizes allow for individual learning plans for each student. We see in the prep learning as a journey, and the exam is the destination. We call it summative assessment, and the assessment of the learning journey is called formative assessment because it informs us, the teachers, and the students, and indeed the parents, of the next required steps. Right at the beginning, in the early years foundation stage, there are 7 areas of learning that I believe are actually relevant to the entire learning journey from 3 to 18 and beyond. They are socio-emotional, physical growth, communication, English, maths, understanding the world around us, and expressive arts. The learning is captured with a digital document linked to each learning goal, and parents and students can comment and add, so we're all on the same page and it's real teamwork. In years 1 to 6, alongside English and maths, we have an umbrella subject called PBL. That stands for project-based learning. This covers subjects such as science, social studies, history, and geography within a real-life context. Soft skills developed here are leadership, creativity, problem-solving, risk-taking to step outside of the children's comfort zones, teamwork, presentation skills, and critical thinking. These may sound very familiar because indeed my colleague Phil has just mentioned them. Perhaps the most important is the ability to communicate. Right from the early years, we teach English, Mandarin, French, Spanish, Bahasa, and recently German. We want to set our students up so they can perform on the world stage, even from the youngest age. We want our students, our prep students, to be successful in the senior school and beyond.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate that. So in terms of, we know that on the senior school that Phil was talking about, principally around IGCSEs and A-levels, exams do happen. It works very well, and it actually is entirely merit-based. For prep school, do we still actually at the end of that or in between, do we have particular tests or quote-unquote examinations which take place?
Yes, we have tests at the end of every term, and we are looking at tests at the end of Key Stage 2 that will then communicate the children's levels to the beginning of Key Stage 3, so we have a smooth transition.
Okay, understood. So it really does sound like you can't get away from the fact that you do need to assess either by tests or examinations somewhere along the line for children as early as 3 years old, coming all the way through to 11, finally getting into senior school, and of course the two 800-pound gorillas, which are IGCSEs and A-levels. Kate, I mean, let's talk a little bit about A-levels. We know that this whole situation in COVID, particularly last year, and it's going to happen again this year, but for example, last year, where, sorry, let's actually talk about this year, because I know that it's UCAS season at this point in time. How is this going to potentially affect students? How are the universities going to be able to take these assessments since there are no final examinations? And is this potentially detrimental to our children?
Okay, Mark, so if I can start with is this going to be detrimental in terms of students getting to university? So it's very reassuring, and I want to make sure that everyone is reassured that the UCAS process has been very successful this year. Like last year, the universities are willing to accept the grades awarded by us teachers in collaboration with the exam boards. We've gone through the UCAS process as normal, and we've put our reference letters in, etc., and the students have received offers. They've got conditions to those offers, just like always, and as long as the students achieve the conditions of the offers, so the condition might be that they have to get 3 A's or 3 B's or whatever it might be, as long as at the end of the year they get those grades, the students will be accepted onto those courses. So there is nothing to worry about in that respect. So there's no detrimental effect at all. The universities completely understand that this is an unprecedented situation and that we're living in a very dynamic period of time where things are changing. If you think about the UK, there will be admission students in the UK who are currently having to work from home with children of their own, possibly of university age, who are unable, or A-level age, who are unable to access schooling at the moment. They completely understand. Same in the US. All over the world, children cannot go to school. Not everyone has got fair access to Wi-Fi. so they're unable to access the digital learning, etc. Universities themselves are having to deliver online learning and keep students back in their halls of residence. They're not able to have them on campus. They completely understand, so there is nothing to worry about in that respect. And in response to what you asked about how does Epsom deal with awarding grades, well, this year, again, it's reassuring that there will be no algorithm. Probably parents and students will be aware that last year an algorithm was used to standardize grades. That's not going to be the case this year. And because of everything that happened last year and the upset with the algorithm, a consultation paper has been sent out this year by the examination boards, the qualification body, and they have sought to gauge teachers' responses and views with regards to how we should approach awarding grades this year if the exams are not to go ahead, which in the vast majority of cases they will not go ahead. There are some exam boards who have yet to decide and who are planning to go ahead with their exams. So the plan is at the moment, but this is yet to be confirmed, when none of us are sure yet exactly what's going to happen, but the suggestion is that exam boards will provide schools with assessments that the teachers can pick and choose from. So rather than having 1 or 2 exams per subject happening on a specific day that cover the entirety of the syllabus, the exam boards are proposing to break down those exams, offering questions on various areas of the syllabus that the teachers can pick and choose from to ensure that children are being assessed on areas of the curriculum that they definitely have covered, despite having missed school. Teachers will then be trained on how to mark those assessments, and there'll be an internal and external moderation process to make sure that the assessment is robust and fair, like Mr. Pedro spoke about there. Fairness is so important. And so in this way, the assessments that are being proposed will ensure a certain standard and a level of rigour, but they will not cover the entirety of the course and therefore allow students to show themselves in the best light on the areas of the curriculum that they have been able to study, bearing in mind that some students have missed up to 100 days of school this year, apparently in some cases. So that's the suggestion, yet to be confirmed. In case those assessments don't go ahead, and in case we do have to provide predicted grades and justify those, assessed grades and justify those assessed grades, we are collecting as much evidence as possible. And I imagine all schools are doing the same thing, whereby we are conducting mock examinations, plenty of assessments, timed under exam conditions where possible, so that students are having to demonstrate their best work under fair conditions where everyone's exposed to the same situation. And extended writing, presentations, projects, etc., so that should the exam boards request evidence from us to justify our assessments and our grading of students, we're able to do so. And just in one other thing in response to the university aspect of the question, it's not just grades that universities will be looking at, not just the A levels. Obviously, students this year do have externally assessed GCSE grades that they will have that universities can look at. They're there. And in addition to the actual grades, there's the personal statement that the student has written. For those that applying to USA universities, the university will have requested reports from year 10, 11, 12 and 13, and will have had to write college essays. And that package together, along with in some cases interviews, does give universities an indication of how able and motivated and engaged that student is. So I hope that answers your question, Mark.
Thanks, Kate. Yes, it does. So it sounds like, again, when you summarize that part of it, although we're getting a lot of this heated criticism about exams and exam-based learnings, principally because they didn't actually happen, the examination boards, as well as each of the schools, are actually being able to come around to a way in which the children and the students themselves are not affected. Phil, one of the things that the main criticism of exam-based learning revolves around survey after survey saying that creativity, critical thinking and communication is not something that exams can actually deal with. Perhaps you could talk a little about that.
Well, I think there is really a misconception with thinking that exams do not include creativity, critical thinking, and communication. IGCSEs and A-levels have evolved, and now they have these skills built into examinations and into the preparation for these examinations. For example, in the subjects I teach in business and economics, students have to respond to questions on a mini case study. That mini case study is about companies in Malaysia, around the world. They are provided with data that they need to analyze, that they need to understand. So critical thinking is key. They have to make sense of the information that is provided. For languages that we have in school, French, Spanish, Mandarin, BM, students have to create a role play. They have to perform it. They have to write it. So creativity is really key in these subjects. And EPQ, we were talking about it earlier. Students are doing a project. They have to present that project to an audience. So communication skills clearly are essential in that subject. So clearly, these skills, creativity, communication, and critical thinking are present in exams. And we could talk about maths, we could talk about geography, or any other subject, really. So it's important for parents to understand the value of examinations. Remember, exams are not only a final paper, they are a journey where students at each stage learn, progress, review. So they build on skills that are very important. And not only these three skills, they build many skills along the way. And at Epsom, obviously, we help students build these skills in lessons, but also beyond the classroom. So we think that the pastoral care is as important as the academics, and that the well-being of our students is also very important. We want students to be happy. We want students to enjoy their life and their school. And that's important, I think. And this is through the CCAs we offer, the extracurricular activities, and there are sports, music, the arts, and many more. So I was talking before about the size of our classes with an excellent ratio teacher-student. Yes, we can provide to students individualized paths, so individualized support that is to do with English, that is to do with working on communication skills, building on skills that they don't master yet. And we do so for presentations, for critical thinking, and other skills. And remember, we are a boarding school, so with boarding houses here, we want students to develop socially, emotionally, culturally. They are our students here at Epsom in contact with students from Japan, from Korea, from China, from all over the world. So they have to communicate, they have to interact, they have to introduce themselves, they have to do presentations, they have to take part in challenges, in competitions. So we want them really to flourish in our school, to become a better version of themselves. So we try to really instill in them independence, creativity, and really what we want is students who are confident to sit exams, confident to go to university and be themselves.
Thanks for that, Phil. You mentioned something there which is, I think, really interesting. I mean, whilst we talk about exams in relation to IGCSE, and we talk about them in relation to A-levels, and the ability finally to get into the university of your choice and study the degree that you want. But you mentioned the extended project qualification. That is something which is actually not exam-based at all. And it's actually worth, correct me if I'm wrong, half an A-level. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can actually explain to our parents a little bit more about what the EPQ is.
Yes, the EPQ, the Extended Project Qualification, is a project that students complete over a period of 1 year, and they select a topic of their choice, and they find a title for that project, and they conduct the research independently, obviously with the support of a supervisor, but they organize the project. So they learn essential skills, again, organization, time management. They need to make sure that all the stages of the research, of the reading of resources, all these stages have to be completed in a certain time frame. And these are important skills for students to have when they go to university. So with the EPQ, this is what we try to help our students with: manage a project from beginning to end. And eventually, yes, they have to present it also to an audience. So they have to review, they have to evaluate their project journey, their research journey, and also present their findings to an audience. So the EPQ is really a great program we have at Epsom to have our students preparing for university and building on these essential skills.
And is that actually worth, I mean, I know it's eventually sent over to the university that they're applying to as an extra, I suppose, an extra example of the ability of that particular student. Is it worth half an A level?
That's correct, yes. But remember, the grade is obviously very important. We have on average A stars for that specific qualification, but it's beyond grades really. What universities value is the skills that the students throughout the project build. And these skills will be mentioned in the personal statements of our students when they apply for universities, that is to do with Cambridge, Oxford, or any university in the world. For instance, we had one of our students, Ugandran, who is now attending Stanford University, who has completed last year an EPQ. And this was referenced in his university application, in his personal statement, and I believe had a great impact on his application.
Okay.
Can I jump in there, Mark, as well, with just to say that the universities will often reduce their grade offer. So if they wanted 3 A's, for example, they might, if you've done well in your EPQ, drop that offer to AAB or ABB, because they recognise that you have undertaken that EPQ qualification. So, for example, one of our students went to Bath this year with a reduced offer because of their achievement in their EPQ, and it does develop skills that are necessary for undergraduate studies. So students that have done well in the EPQ tend to excel in their first year at university because they have those skills necessary to do well in that first year extended essay.
That's great. Thanks for that, Kate. So if we can, a little bit of a summary here. It's not that exam-based learning is bad and that deserves to be axed. It is about what else a school actually provides apart from exam-based learning. It's about how do you push the creative abilities, how do you actually make sure that the ability to communicate, social skills, and at the end of the day, critical thinking. It's actually not so much down to the exam, the subjects and the examination board. It almost sounds like it's impacted very much by the type of school that a child or parents would actually choose to attend. I think, in really sort of summarizing this, you've got to make sure at the end of the day that exams are important, they're part of life. In adult life, testing and being able to achieve is commonplace today. But it's also about care, how you're actually making sure that child or student is able to learn in rigor. It's about making sure they're supported all the way through, and the ability for them finally to achieve the kind of exam results needed to give them a pathway to what they eventually want to do in adult life, be that medicine, be that being a lawyer, and so on and so forth. So what I'd like to do now is, I think we've heard enough from the teaching faculty here. If there are any questions at this point in time, you can actually type them in on your Zoom software if you happen to have that. So if we have any questions at this point in time, we'd be more than happy to answer them. Looks like some people aren't necessarily on their, maybe everyone's on their mobile phones. And if they are on their mobile phones, it's a bit difficult to type in those, I'd imagine. Nope. Ah, here we go. Oh, no. Okay. Not much in terms of questions at this point in time. So in summary, exam-based learning is not as bad as it's potentially made out to be. The principle here of everyone talking about critical thinking, creativity, communications, this is actually baked in now by individual schools to ensure that it's all taken care of. Testing, exams, because of the fact that you need to move on to universities, it's a natural part of life. And this is probably not going to, it may change a little. The way grades are determined, the way that universities look at those may eventually sort of change. But I think what we're trying to put forward at this point in time is you've got to look at what a school can put together and provide to your child in its entirety. So in this particular case, thank you very much to Phil, thanks to Alice, and thanks to Kate. Unfortunately, we don't have any more questions at this point in time. And if you do, we'd be more than happy to hear from you. Just follow us on our Facebook page or Twitter or Instagram. The next webinar, the fourth one, will be in about 2 weeks' time. Oh, hang on, we have one here. How much time is your student given to complete his EPQ? Phil, why don't you answer that one?
Sure. So usually we get our students 2 years to complete the program. However, now we are switching to a 1-year course. Our students are able to complete that course quite quickly, as they're given all the tools so to organize the project, to find a title, to find the resources. So our school, it works a little bit different than other schools. We try to have that program completed within 1 year. However, we are flexible. If students require, because of the nature of the project, slightly more time, we offer that option of having a 2-year program.
And here we go. What are your suggestions to get our Malaysian students, especially the younger ones, to realize the importance of exams and the skills that we incorporate in our lessons? Alice, would you like to perhaps provide, and then maybe after that, Kate as well?
I think this pandemic has shown the children as well as us that you must be flexible and that you do have to take responsibility for your own learning, because we don't know which way the world is going to go. And I have found that even at prep level, the children are really engaging in their learning and thinking ahead, and they are actually prepared to put in the extra work. Malay students, I don't really feel I can comment on that, but certainly the international students in the prep school, I feel, have a natural ambition that has recently increased, in fact. Kate?
I think that doing well in exams is a byproduct of happy and engaged students. I think if the teaching is excellent and the student experience is excellent, and the school takes a holistic approach, then doing well in exams is a byproduct. And that kind of sounds a bit cheesy, maybe, and a bit overly positive, but I do see that to be the case. That's what I believe to be true, and I think that that's our culture here. How do we get them to recognise the importance of exams? I think by getting students of different age groups to collaborate together on projects. I think for older students to work with younger students and to talk about their experiences, and for the younger students to realise when they're with older students to see how close those exams are to them. They can feel far away, but actually they're not really, are they? And I think by having plenty of collaboration between year groups, such as in the boarding houses like here, where younger students see the older students, speak with them, mix with them, discuss with them, buddy up with them, maybe have them mentor them, I think that can be very, very helpful. But I think that focusing too much on exams and talking too much about exams and making pupils feel anxious about them can have the opposite effect, and I think we need to be mindful of that. As a teacher and as a mum, I think that trying to find a pupil's passion, trying to find something within the subject with which the pupil can engage is very, very helpful. So I don't want to sound overly idealistic, but I really do think that if you can find something, a way in, build a really positive relationship with a student and enjoy the learning process, enjoy the learning journey together, and have a very collaborative approach, I think that they will do better in the exams as a byproduct of that experience.
Thanks, Kate. Phil, there's another question which has come up. This is in relation to our fast-track A-level program. Are they also given the 1 full year to complete the EPQ, and essentially will it affect his regular studies for his A-levels?
That's a good question. So the fast track is a new program we have. They complete examinations with less time than our normal courses. So for EPQ, really, there is not much of an effect because they have, instead of a few weekly lessons, 4 weekly lessons for EPQ. They have plenty of support. They have one-to-one sessions as well built in their timetable. So they have a lot of support to complete with very limited time their EPQ. They usually start with the EPQ program first, even before they go onto maths, science, and other subjects they elect. So they are really spending a lot of time right at the beginning. And I think this is really the stage 1 of the EPQ, finding the topic, finding the title. That takes a lot of time. So we spend a lot of time one-to-ones with students to really see individually what they're interested about and make sure they have a title so they can start their project very quickly. And when they do, then it's just following what the exam requires, which is a journal, so recording all the research they do, writing an essay with an academic structure, making sure the references are following correct formats. And there's as well a candidate record form. And what I was talking about during the webinar is the presentation that comes at the end. So in short, no, fast-track students will not be impacted. In fact, that may be a positive. The examination board, AQA, EPQ, requires students to manage their time well. So in their research journal, they talk about these challenges and how they manage them. And again, this is a very important skill and something that they will be able to write about in their university statement wherever they decide to apply for.
Thanks, Phil. There's another question, which is essentially, during exams, what time management skills need to be sort of encouraged so that studies and the ability to focus on studies and the examinations work better? Kate, do you want to take a stab at that?
So time, can I see the question again? What time management
What
skills?
do you think about time management skills that help during an exam?
Okay, so during the actual exam, I think it's really important to have plenty of practice at completing examinations, timed practice. You obviously build up towards that, but plenty of practice so students get an idea of how long each section is going to take for them. Inevitably, there are questions towards the end of an exam paper that are worth more marks than the questions at the beginning. So it's about playing with the structure of the exam too. For some students, it's better to start with the last question and work backwards, because the questions that are worth less at the beginning of the paper. They, if they're tired, it's probably better to do the questions at the beginning of the paper towards the end of the exam. So it's those time management skills is about playing with what works best for you. Some students, they like to, their approach is that they will start the paper. If they can't do a question, they spend a maximum amount of time on each question, and they will move on and then go back over the questions they find more difficult towards the end of the paper. So they're not looking at 8 questions, spending ages on that, and then not having enough time to finish the remaining one. So it's about playing with exam technique. And in terms of time management working up towards the exams, again, I think that comes down to really good teaching and pastoral care. It's breaking down the term, breaking down the year, having a very clear program of study. So students have got sort of checkpoints built into their year. When should they start revising? How should they be revising? What works best for them, making it interactive. So it's collaborative. Most students will need support to do that, because it's a skill that younger students, when they're doing their GCSEs, many of those students won't have those skills. It's kind of like parenting, really, to an extent. You help them work out their time, what needs to be done by when, reviewing their work, going through their work, addressing areas of weakness, teaching pupils to focus on what they don't know. If they know it, great, but building in plenty of tasks to test their knowledge. If they know something, great, they don't need to worry about that. It's building in plenty of revision tasks and active learning tasks, so that they can identify the areas of weakness and focusing on those, and ensuring that there's ample time in which to do that. So I hope that's a very wordy answer, but I hope I've answered the question. Excellent input from teachers, helping the students to understand how to prepare for those examinations, and then actually having plenty of exam style practice, so that the students are really, when they go into that exam, they look at the clock, they know how long they should be spending on each question, which parts of the paper are worth the most, and allocating time appropriately during the exam.
That's great. Thanks, Kate. And any other questions at this point in time? No? All right. Well, listen, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for... oh, we've got one more. Here we go. What is your opinion on using psychological tests as a tool to measure the student's characteristics to fit the requirement besides the exam grades? That's a question which I've certainly never come across before. Phil, do you have any opinions on that?
Well, what I can say, that this is a very specific question we have here. Of course, it's important to assess our students' needs, to understand their background. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, or if I'm going out of that question, but I think at Epsom what we try to do, especially even before the admission process, is to really get to know our students. Yes, we have standardized tests to see their ability, but I think what's important for us is to meet them, to talk to them, to talk to parents, to have enough information so we can build individualized path. So students feel that they are really welcome, that we really know them. So I think you may be right, tests are important, and we use them, standardized tests to see their levels in maths, in English, if they need support in EL, and we use the data from these tests to inform our support system in school. But I think it goes beyond that. I think it's important that beyond tests we do to get to know the abilities of students, that we actually talk to them, that we actually build a relationship. And that's important, especially as a boarding school. This is really an essential part of our job here at Epsom.
Can I come in there as well?
Yeah, please.
I was just going to say that if that's a reference to maybe having some additional tests to see if they've got any additional needs, so maybe they require some additional input, then of course, that can be very, very useful. But I would say in most cases, it would be evident to us if there was an issue. Most, teachers generally these days have had training on identifying when students have got additional needs, but having the tests can enable us to ask for extra time, for example. Students with challenges to their learning may be eligible for 25% extra time in their examinations, for example, or they may be eligible to have a prompter. So coming back to that time management question, some students, they can't maintain their concentration, and therefore having an adult there to prompt them, to remind them to stay on task and to remind them to move on to the next question if they're spending too long on one, can be meaningful. So those tests in that case can be useful, but I think if a child has got any additional needs, we would probably recognise that, but having the test would enable us then to apply to the exam board for additional support for that student in the exam.
Kate, I guess that's where the small class sizes come in as well, that we know our students so well that we can pick up on these additional needs if they exist very, very early and address them.
And another question, when it comes to the assessments, students and even teachers may shudder with anxiety of bad results. What method could avoid this pitfall? So in other words, anxiety of actually not achieving. How do you balance that out so it doesn't become a major problem? And Phil, would you?
Sure. So as I mentioned previously, I think it's important to prepare students well in advance for these examinations. You cannot prepare the last few minutes, the last few hours, anything. So exams have to be prepared in advance. And when I say that, is 2 years, 3 years maybe before the examination. So build skills that allow students to be able to cope with pressure, to be able to put together the knowledge to complete a task, an exam. And I think this is what we try to do at Epsom with competitions we have going on, societies, the CCAs where students have to do competitions within the school with other international schools. This is this kind of mindset we want our students to have, to be confident that they can do it, that it is a competition, that it is an exam, they can do it. And yes, the stress then will be something that they are able to manage in a much better way.
If in the worst case scenario, it does go wrong, so let's say that the exam's results aren't what you hoped for, there is always a plan B. There is always a plan B. We can always sort something. So for those students doing their A-levels, maybe they won't get into their first choice university because something will go wrong. Or maybe they don't get the exam results that they were meant to have because something horrible happened. Maybe something awful happened and there were extenuating circumstances. And our job then is to communicate that to the university or to the college or whatever it might be, so that the person at the other end understands. But we will find a way. There are alternatives. So I, again, coming back to saying as a mum myself, it can be really stressful as parents watching your children going through examinations, and of course they feel anxious, and that shows that they care, etc. And I completely agree with Phil that yes, we start preparing early, and I think preparing early and preparing children to develop those skills of resilience and competency and exam technique, etc., they should be well set to do well. But if they don't, then reach out, because there will be a plan B that we can identify and put into place to support families.
Thanks, Kate. Now, I'll probably make this the last question here, which is, how do you monitor, just leave it, Irene, how do you monitor, go back to the screen, please. How do you monitor students' needs in an online setting? Do you allocate time outside of school hours to speak to them? And what suggestions can you provide for parents to work together with the school, especially during the challenges of the pandemic? I think that is actually a fantastic question. Phil, do you want to try starting that? And maybe Alice, you may have some opinions as well.
Sorry, if you could just display the question
Yes.
for me on the screen, that would help.
It's the how do you monitor students' needs in an online setting? Do you allocate time outside of school hours to speak to them? And what suggestions can you provide?
So during online lessons, what we do as teachers is we make sure students obviously understand the content of the lessons. It is not just a presentation we do in lessons, it is very much what we do in a normal setting. So we have activities where students do group activities, where they do presentations, where they demonstrate that they understood knowledge that is taught during sessions. And yes, if students need support, we provide it. The activities we have in the lessons are differentiated, so they cater for all levels. And we offer as well extra sessions for GCSE, for example, as we normally do. They are just online. These sessions are happening at break time, at lunchtime, after school. Some are CCS, so they are built in within the school timetable. And yes, they are happening throughout the day. And we focus on specific students who are struggling, maybe with their situation at home, being isolated. So we identify very early on the needs, and we make sure that we provide support.
I think also it's to Mr. Tristan, who came up with that question. I think it's important to actually highlight as well that as a boarding school, we're very, very fortunate where many of our students are within the school and they reside within the school. What happens then is that after classes and after sports and CCAs, the evening, we call it prep, but it's actually homework session. We actually have the teachers go into the boarding houses to spend time and provide that extra support to all of our children, all of our students. That actually gives a far better opportunity of clarifying situations that students may not necessarily want to have put their hand up in the classroom environment, but when they're in their boarding house environment, which, let's face it, is their second home, they're more comfortable to actually raise issues, questions, etc. And our teaching faculty actually reside on site as well. So there's always 24/7 academic as well as pastoral care for all of our students.
For the parent to collaborate with the school, though, reach out. If you're worried about something, then reach out. I think the second part of the question was, how can parents support? I can't see the wording of it. How do suggestions for parents to work together with the school, especially during the challenge of the pandemic? Well, we've been having meetings with parents very, very recently because we completely understand that, I met with a parent just the other day who's concerned about her son and the options process because her son's in year 9. He's not sure what to choose for his options. They're concerned about the future. Reach out and have those one-to-one conversations because it just can't be replaced. So organise, a face-to-face meet like we're having now. It's not perfect, but at least you're able to run through the questions and the concerns that you've got rather than letting that fester and build. So I would strongly encourage you to make contact with the school directly.
I think the other thing is for the parents, really encourage your children to be open about the struggles that they're having with online learning. It shouldn't be hidden. They don't have to be strong. They must be open and discuss it. And together we can find solutions to all the problems. We believe that the children should be free to speak to their teachers, whether in a small group or individually. In fact, in the prep school, during the online day, we have a specific time where we can review the learning with individual students, discuss it, go over it, or indeed just talk about how they're doing emotionally. And this is really, really key. So as a parent, I would say, encourage your child to be open and discuss how they feel authentically and transparently.
Thanks, Alice. And the last question, good question as well. When the pandemic ends, do you believe in keeping online learning or going back to school? Well, We received information from the Ministry of Education that all schools, or certainly ourselves, we are able to actually come back to physical face-to-face classes on the 8th of March. I think the answer, the overall answer to that question is we are great believers that classes and the interaction within our school should be as immersive as possible. We do not think that online learning is the only way of doing that. We will be opening on the 8th of March. We know our students love to be back in school. It is a 50-acre self-contained site. It's almost like its own little village with safety and security at the foremost, particularly for our students and our children. So physical classes, the interaction that teachers are able to provide to students, I think you can't replace that insofar as we're a small school. We have small classes. The number of children in a class to a teacher are far smaller than normal. What that actually entitles every child is that personal level of support, the ability for a teacher to look that child in the eye and see whether the messages are coming through. You can't do that online. And that is best served and best provided, we think, in a physical environment. And that's something that we can do now here in Malaysia, that whole boarding school ability. And we do it really quite well. Okay, I think that's the last one. So thank you very much indeed for coming on for the webinar. The next one is in 2 weeks' time. And if you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and or Instagram, we'll be announcing the topic at that point of time. Thank you very much.